Good morning. It is Friday, November the 23rd, and this is The Drill. Thank you very much. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States of America today, because I'm the only one that makes the presumption for the status quo. And I'm here delivering the message to the butchers, the bakers, and the candlestick makers. One of the things that occurred to me is that about the irony and perhaps contradiction of socialism and socialists, the big irony of it. Socialism is, in a word, about socializing people, socializing the entire planet. And so everybody is supposed to get along with one another, no wars, no fights, no arguments. Everybody lives in peace and social harmony, i.e. socialist paradise. So all the tactics and the techniques, however, for achieving that end are antisocial. Revolution itself is not a social activity. It is an antisocial activity. Look at some of the other tactics that the left is using. Antifa disrupting protest marches with various acts of violence. Any act of violence is antisocial. And going out and being violent towards your political opponents when you see them in a restaurant and running into that restaurant, making noise, yelling and screaming, trying to chase them out of the restaurant. In some cases where the restaurant owners are going to these individuals, whether it's Sarah Sanders or somebody else, and asking them to leave. Antisocial. So again, so much of the left is fundamentally about contradictions. Skepticism, which is the contradiction that nothing can be known with certainty. And then all culminating in socialism itself, which is the contradiction of using asocial methods and means to achieve social ends. Be back in a minute. Thank you very much, and welcome back. So I'm reading now. Let me see what. Wait a minute. It is called "The Illusion of Determinism" by Edwin A. Locke, and here's some of the contents of this: the brain, what is consciousness? Well, preface, introduction, the brain, what is consciousness, causality, goal-directed action, the self, the Libet studies, much ado about almost nothing, the fatal flaw in determinism, what free will is and is not, and concluding remarks. So I'm going to be reading from the preface today. So because I think it is so much, Marxism is fundamentally based on determinism, about the fiction that men have no free will. Preface. The issue of free will has occupied philosophers as far back as the ancient Greeks. Plato and Aristotle were not much concerned with the concept of free will. The Stoics may have been the first to introduce the issue explicitly, specifically Epictetus, who viewed free will as giving or not giving assent to your emotions. Alexander of Aphrodisias, a peripatetic, put emphasis on the use of reason as a determinant of whether one acts on one's emotions or not. Christian philosophers, starting with Origen in the 3rd century and Augustine a century later, took up the issue from the Stoics, but free will did not become an official church doctrine until the 5th century. This issue caused a great deal of controversy, which persists to this day. In Genesis, God tells Adam and Eve not to eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge, but they disobeyed him, and God banished them from the Garden of Eden. According to Scripture, we've been paying the price ever since, such as being made to work for a living. To some, Genesis may imply free will, but it also represents original sin, which is taken by some to mean that man has an innate tendency toward evil, which would imply free will, but with loaded dice. There have been endless debates on the issue among Christian and Jewish theologians. The problem is that if God were omniscient and omnipotent, then many claim he would have to have foreknowledge of who would obey and who would sin. This would simply imply predestination, as in Calvinism, but this would contradict free will. Some have claimed that humans are simply unable to understand God's higher truths, though it is not clear by what means we could even know that he had higher truths. There can be no resolution to these contradictions in religious terms, since the whole basis for the debate, including the existence of a God, is grounded in faith and not reason. The development of modern science added fuel to this debate. The discovery that the body was a machine which operated according to the laws of physics and chemistry, including electricity, and that consciousness depended on the existence of a brain, threatened to totally materialize man. Consciousness was dismissed by many as a mystical anachronism or as an incidental byproduct of brain activity, which served no function. In this view, all causal relationships were mechanical. If science were to be taken seriously, then it was assumed that determinism had to be true. Thus, free will would be a myth. This view is still prevalent, though not universal. The philosophical debate has continued through the centuries within and outside of religion and is still debated today. I believe that my book can help to bring about a resolution or at least move the debate forward. This may sound optimistic, but I think that progress has been blocked by looking at the issue too narrowly. In short, by the failure to deal with key issues that underline the debate: the nature of consciousness, the nature of causality, the nature of goal-directed action, the locus of choice, and the failure to take the law of contradiction seriously. Some years ago, the authors of an article in a well-regarded science magazine reported the survey results of eminent evolutionary scientists. Overwhelmingly, the scientists were not religious, and equally overwhelmingly, they believed in free will. The authors were quite upset about the latter. They ended with, quote, "Belief in free will adds nothing to the science of human behavior," unquote. Unfortunately, the study did not ask the scientists to identify what they meant by free will, what it consisted of. Further, we shall see that without free will there could be no science of human behavior at all. In fact, there could be no science of anything. At the same time, defenders of free will have not made a convincing case. They often base free will on indeterminism, randomness, an idea taken from particle theory. This does not work. Randomness is not control. I hope in this book to set the record straight. I must acknowledge at the outset that my key philosophical points are based on objectivism, the philosophy of Ayn Rand, including her theory of volition. I have enlarged and expanded the discussion of the issue, but am in full agreement with her views. Many of the ideas in this book are consistent with the penetrating insights of psychologist Albert Bandura. Bandura's views are his own and not based on Ayn Rand. So, again, this is a central issue, and if man has no free will, then the left is correct in doing the things they're doing in terms of government controls. If man has no free will, then man smokes because he's forced to by powers beyond his control, big tobacco. And so therefore, government must step in and provide a counterforce equal to or greater than that of big tobacco to force people to quit smoking and not to begin smoking in the first place. That kind of thing. So, more on that next time, but as far as this is going to be a short or abbreviated version of the drill, so we've reached the conclusion of this particular episode of the drill, and until next time, thank you very much for listening, and have a great day.